Okay. Good Vach. Good Vach. Good Vach. So, after World War II, there was a great inspiration to have unity among all nations of the world, get back together, peace treaty. But Stalin, Yimach Shemo, he didn't want any part of that. On the contrary, his anti-Semitism continued with even greater force after World War II. Tonight I'm going to share an incredible story that happened 70 years ago on Purim in 1953. A story that much of it isn't so famous, and a very fundamental story to understand a lot of history that where we are now and the salvation of Hashem that really changed the face of the world 70 years ago on Purim. Rosie, can you please sit over here? Or you want to hum? Let's sing together. Okay. So what happens like this. There was several doctors that were accused by a woman named Lydia Tomaszewski. If Menachem, you could correct my pronunciation of any of the Russian names I use tonight, that would be very appreciated. Lydia Tomaszewski, she brought an accusation that the doctors of the Russian government were involved in trying to kill Stalin and many other people in the communist regime. Of course, this was all orchestrated by Stalin himself, but just to have someone to officially make this claim legitimate. So this woman, Lydia Tomaszewski, she came forward and she made this accusation, and she received the Lenin Award for her testimony. She said that the death of two of the prominent people in power at the time in the Russian government, one of them's name was, I'm trying to say his name correctly. Janov and Shurbakov. Janov and Shurbakov died because the Jewish doctors had poisoned them. And the Jewish doctors weren't just trying to poison those who had died already, but they actually were involved in trying to poison many others in the Russian government. And therefore, this accusation, which became public knowledge in January 13th, 1953, 26th of Tavis in Tafshin Gimel, this caused a huge rise in anti-Semitism. But not just a rise in anti-Semitism, the doctors accused were all Jewish, and they were going to probably be sentenced to death. But more than all this, what became revealed many years later, which wasn't known then, was that Stalin learned a lot from the Nazis. Stalin said he planned that that the Jews, because they are involved in trying to destroy the Russian government, his official claim was very similar to what the Nazis said in the early stages of the Nazis' plan to destroy the Jewish people. They said we want to protect the Jewish people. Because the Jewish people are a danger to society, people may take the law into their own hands, they may try to kill the Jews, and therefore we're going to put the Jews in a separate region in concentration camps to protect them. That was the official reason Nazis said the Jews have to be taken away from society to these concentration camps. So in a similar way, Stalin had a plan that was fully set. There are houses built I say call them houses, but really they were bunkers built in northeastern Siberia in a region called Verchovyansk. That's the best way of pronouncing it, sorry. In Verchovyansk, there are till today these bunkers, which do not have windows, and it's extremely cold there, and they were planning to bring the Jews from their homes and wherever they lived in Russia to this region in northeast Siberia, and to thereby kill them slowly through the cold, through the frost. And there were trains ready to take the Jews from all over Russia to Siberia to as officially to protect them because of the rise of anti-Semitism that was expected because of the sentence that was going to be naturally announced that all the doctors who were involved in trying to kill Stalin were going to be killed. So that was what was going on. This woman, Lydia Tumashavsky, she got the Lenin Award for her testimony, and the court was in full swing. The doctors were going to be killed. The Jewish people were going to be exiled from throughout Russia to northeastern Siberia. Today, on the 18th of Adar, in 1953, it was announced that 2 days ago, the Russians announced, 2 days ago Stalin got sick, and now he is he's lying down and he is unconscious. And the next day, they announced that in the truth that Stalin had died before. Stalin actually died on the night after Purim. The death of Stalin on Purim, like the death of Haman on Purim, was not a natural occurrence. It was a miracle of Hashem to save the Jewish people, specifically at this time when the Jewish people really needed it, because of all that was going on, not just because of all the terrible things that Stalin was doing throughout his regime in Russia, but again because of this unique plot to totally exile all the Jewish people to northeastern Siberia. The Rebbe didn't talk about this plot since it was announced on January 13th, 26th of Tevis. The Rebbe didn't speak about it. However, the Rebbe did hint that there were some things that Rebbe did that were unusual. That Rabbi Groner, who was 22 years old at the time, he noticed that he felt that this was connected to what was going on. For example, there was a song that the Jewish people sang when they walked to the gas chambers. They sang the song of Ani Mam, I believe with perfect faith in the coming of Mashiach. And that year, Parshas Vayera, 1953, the Rebbe sang that song and spoke about the sacrifice of the Jewish people. On the 21st of Teves, right before this announcement, the Rebbe released a discourse, and up until that point in Chabad history, discourses of chassidus were put out and published for special occasions. This wasn't any special occasion. The 21st of Teves wasn't known for anything unique. And the Rebbe said to publish a discourse which spoke about how Hashem does not play tricks with the Jewish people, and how the Jewish people exhibit incredible sacrifice to keep Torah mitzvahs. And it was a discourse highlighting how devoted the Jewish people are to do the will of Hashem. But the first time that the Rebbe spoke openly about Stalin was on Parshas Shmos, which was on the 23rd of Teves, right before this announcement. And the Jewish people's fear at the time grew from day to day. I don't think people knew then about the plan to exile them to northeastern Siberia, but just the fact that all these Jews were going to be sentenced to death, the natural anti-Semitism that this was causing, was something that caused them to be more and more frightened every day. So back in New York in 770, the Torah says, Gilei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Seidi Al Avodah Neviim, Hashem reveals the secrets to his servants, the prophets of Hashem. And the Rebbe was leading a farbrengen on that Purim. The Rebbe's style of talk involves two different kinds of talks. There are siches and then maimarim. Siches are talks and explanations or topics of various parts of the Torah, or topics about current events and what Jewish people should do. And maimarim are called amongst Chassidim Divrei Elokim Chaim, words of the living God. Before a Rebbe says a maimer, he wraps his hand with a handkerchief, and he did a special song that's sung. He closes his eyes, and he said a special discourse. Throughout this special occasion on Purim, the special farbrengen, the Rebbe said 11 talks, and he gave a discourse. But unlike anything that had ever happened before, towards the end of this farbrengen, the Rebbe said a story. The story was like this. After the fall of the Tsar, there was a vote. And the Rebbe Cashapp encouraged his chassidim to attend the vote. So there was one chassid. This is a story the Rebbe said then. I remember Rabbi Yoel Khan said that the discourse the Rebbe said at the time was a difficult one. But more harder than the discourse, to understand the discourse was hard to understand the story the Rebbe said. The story the Rebbe said didn't seem to have any beginning or end, and just something the Rebbe shared for reasons known to him. The Rebbe said this. The Rebbe Cashapp said that the chassidim should vote. So one chassid, to do the will of his Rebbe, he went to the mikveh, he immersed himself, and he put on his prayer garments, his gartel, and he went to the polls. And at the polls, there was a rally for one of the candidates. Now everyone was screaming the Russian version of hooray, hoorah, 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 which also could be translated as he is evil. So the Rebbe pulled his hands upwards and said, hoorah, 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 and said the story about this chassid, and then he turned to his right. He repeated the whole story over again. The Rebbe Cashapp, after the fall, after the revolution, he said the chassidim should participate in the vote, and he said the whole story again. And this chassid went, and he put on his gartel, and he didn't know what was going. He wasn't at all connected to the things of this world, but he went to vote because the Rebbe said to vote, and everyone's part of the. There was a cheer, hoorah, and the chassid joined the cheer, hoorah, hoorah, and again the Rebbe threw his hands up 3 times, and then he turned to his left, and he said the story again a 3rd time, hoorah, 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 the whole story a 3rd time. Then the Rebbe turned in back of him, and behind the Rebbe there were older chassidim, and the older chassidim, the Rebbe again turned to them, started the story all over again, and said the whole story again, and he said and concluded the story with, and then the chassid said, hoorah, 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 lifting his holy hands up again. All the chassidim there realized that what was happening was not just a story, something else was going on, and they all stood up and they all exclaimed together, hoorah, hoorah, hoorah. That's what happened then. And later, they discovered at that time, that's the exact moment when Stalin died. Actually, Beria, who was the top brass of the Russian secret police, they have different branches of the secret police, the NKVD, the GPU. He was a top brass, and when Stalin had this stroke, he took over the Stalin's security team, and he told no one to go in, and actually everyone was afraid to go in because Stalin was accusing all of his doctors trying to kill him. Everyone was afraid to go in, and only after a while, when they were sure that he died, did they all go in together to Stalin. Anyways, so after it wasn't just in the capital city that there was a lot of rise of anti-Semitism, and there was all these issues. In Rostov, there was a Russian professor named Peter Lalchuk. Peter Lalchuk said that how old was the Rebbe then? Well, the Rebbe was born in 1902, so it was 1953. So that means he was 51. Peter Lalchuk, he was living then in Rostov. He was arrested, just like the doctors of the Russian government were arrested. Many other Jewish doctors were also arrested as a result of this, and one of them was Peter Lalchuk. Rather, in this city, Peter Lalchuk shared the story with Elisha Kaplan, Rabbi Elisha Kaplan. He told him that he was arrested. Alexander Dabrowski was arrested. A man named Pavel Amdin was arrested. He said that he was very young, and he was accused. Peter was accused of killing one of his patients. One of his patients had died, and he was accused of poisoning and directly killing his patient. Alexander Dabrowski, he was accused of putting up propaganda against the regime, against the communist regime. And when Peter was arrested, they brought him in on the 18th of Adar in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, out of his cell to tell him to show him his accusation, to show him what he was accused of. And as he's being told what he's accused of, the officer who is sharing all this with him gets a phone call. And the phone call, he discovers that Stalin has died. And he basically gets upset. He says, go home. And he was freed immediately. This woman who had brought the whole accusation of all these Jewish doctors, Lydia Tomaszewski, she was summoned and she was stricken from her Lenin Award. In Rostov, there were trains ready to go to take the Jews to northeastern Siberia. In Rostov, there's no official ghetto, but there is at that time. But there was an area called the ghetto because many Jews lived in a certain area, and there was a very strong fear that there were trains ready to go take the Jews out from their homes. Not only that, I forgot to mention, in addition to exiling the Jews from their homes, the plan was, besides going to near the Chinese border to exile them, the plan was that since they have to protect the Jewish people from the anti-Semites, they're sending them far away. However, the plan was that on the way to Siberia, they're going to open up the trains and let Russian mobs attack the Jews. That was the official plan. And so, Baruch Hashem, as a result of this miracle of Stalin's death, and a month later, the 19th day of Nisan, the government formally announced that this whole claim that the Russian doctors, the Jewish doctors, had tried to poison people, this is all a total provocation. It was telling it's not true. And many other political prisoners, thousands of political prisoners, were all freed, and many hundreds of thousands of political prisoners their sentences were commuted as a result of Stalin's death. So this is what happened, and I just want to point out, it's not just something that Chassidim say, that the Rebbe said this and this is what happened. The Rebbe himself also noted the connection between this discourse and what he had said. Forgot to mention, after Rebbe said the story, he began saying the discourse. In the discourse, he spoke about how when there is a Haman who tries to destroy the Jewish people, so Hashem, although it seems that a Jewish person deserves the opposite of goodness because he's acting a similar way to Haman, nevertheless Hashem says, I love Yaakov and I hate Esav, and Hashem rescues the Jewish people despite all the accusations. That was what discourse was about. And in the intro to this discourse that the Rebbe edited, he said that this discourse was said in connection with the death of the Tzir HaYehudim, of the one who oppressed the Jewish people, Stalin Yimach Shemai. That's what it says in the discourse. So the Rebbe himself acknowledged this. A similar thing happened. My grandfather, Rabbi Fogel said that he was by the previous Rebbe's Seder. And in the middle of the Seder, in the Seder on Passover, we say the words, Hashem kills great kings because his kindness is everlasting. So the previous Rebbe, during the whole Seder, he was very quiet usually, but when he got to this point, he announced out loud, he said it very loud. It was middle of World War II. And my grandfather, he was then studying the Yeshiva and Torah Badas. He wasn't familiar with the ways of tzaddikim. He didn't pay any particular significance. So he says the words out loud. So what? But an older chassid told my grandfather, he called him over. He says, I'm telling you, news has happened now in the world. There's news. And sure enough, that is also when the Tzir HaYehudim, the other great anti-Semite of this generation, was killed. Hitler Yimach Shemai, at that time also, that Passover, died as well. That's the first story I wanted to share. I have a second story for you tonight. The story is an incredible story, also connected with the Rebbe's hands. But this one is a positive one. Not just about destroying the enemies of the Jewish people, but about a great blessing. Here it goes. There's a Jew named Yehuda ben Shushan. He lives in northern Israel, and he was married for many years without children. And he asked the Rebbe for a blessing for children. And 10 years after his marriage, he and his wife are blessed with a daughter. When their daughter turned 10 years old, the doctors discovered in her head a tumor. And that time in Israel, they didn't feel that there was enough, the doctors knew enough to help their daughter. The doctors didn't feel, and they sent their daughter to Boston, to the expert doctors in Boston. She came to Boston, the doctors examined her, and they told the father and mother. The father traveled with her to the doctor, and they told him that there's two possible situations, two possible methods of treatment. Either they could do nothing, they don't expect her to live more than 6 months, chas shalom, or they could do an operation. However, they are not sure the operation will be successful, and it may, God forbid, end with she may not survive the operation. So what do you want us to do? So he, of course, doesn't know what to do. He was totally broken. He didn't want to do anything. But his wife pressured him. You must go to the Rebbe, ask the Rebbe the question to find out what we should do. Should we do an operation and risk what the doctors are saying, or not do anything when the doctors are saying that she can't live more than 6 months? So he came to the Rebbe, and when he came to the Rebbe's room, he was unable to talk. He was so distraught, he came to the Rebbe's room and just burst out crying. And I don't know if this is the reason or not the reason, but there is a concept of a tzaddik removing a decree upon a person through the person experiencing frustration or angst. So the Rebbe said to him, now it's the month of Adar, and Adar is a time of adding in joy. Why are you bringing sadness into this room? So he thought the Rebbe was joking. I mean, his daughter's life is at stake now, and they need to know what to do. What's the Rebbe saying? He said, it's my daughter. And the Rebbe said, is that how you're going to save your daughter? Now it's the month of Adar. Adar is a time of adding in joy. By bringing, the Rebbe said, very serious, is that how you're going to bring sadness? Is that how you're going to save your daughter? So he told the Rebbe, I'm ready to be happy, but how can I be happy when this is what's going on with my daughter? So the Rebbe said, the month of Adar is a month of joy because all that's negative is transformed to positive in the month of Adar. It sounded like the Rebbe told him, you need to be happy, and just going to be happy because you're told to be. That's what there was a similar thing actually happened to Rabbi Dunan al-Shalom. He was always, throughout his life, he was very distraught about all the mistakes he made in his life. He was always very sad. And Rebbe once spoke to him privately and told him that he has to be happy. He said, why should I be happy? And instead of telling him a reason and patting him on the back, Rebbe said, because you're told to be happy. So apparently being happy is a decision. As the Zohar says, the word happiness has the same letters as the words thought. Machshava, which is thought, and bisimcha, and joy, and being happy are the same letters. Rebbe told this person, the month of Adar is a month of joy because things are transformed for good, and therefore you have to be happy. I mean, it seemed a lot more clear what the Rebbe was saying. The Rebbe was saying to him that there's going to be good news. I mean, things will be transformed. That's what the Rebbe was saying. So therefore, you should be happy. And that's how you bring the blessing down. That's what it seemed to be the sentiment of the Rebbe saying. Anyways, he leaves the Rebbe's room, and he was so confused by the Rebbe's criticizing him, of him not being happy, that he forgot to ask the Rebbe the question, should they do the operation or not? So he wanted to go back into the Rebbe to ask the Rebbe if they should do the operation. And he told the secretary, oh my gosh, I have to go back in. There's a question of life and death. I need to go back in. I have a question. Secretary said, you can't go back in. You went out. That's it. That was your audience. But I have this question. I need to know what to do. So the Rebbe's secretary said, so write a letter. So he did. He wrote a letter to the Rebbe. I need to know what to do. I forgot to ask you, do we do the operation? Don't do the operation. What are we going to do? So the Rebbe responded, I already answered you. So this man didn't feel he had an answer. His daughter's life was at stake, and he was distraught, and he apparently wasn't that great of a chassid. A chassid of greater caliber would have probably gotten the hint already by this time, but he didn't. And he said, I don't know what the answer is. I need to know what to do. And the Rebbe responded, if you are specifically asking, then you should go to, and you should speak to a third doctor. Remember, they had two doctors. One doctor said do the operation. One doctor said not do the operation. The Rebbe said, if you're specifically asking, then you should go to a third doctor. So he went to a third doctor. The third doctor said they should do the operation. They did the operation, and Baruch Hashem, miraculously, the tumor that they thought was there wasn't. But as a result of the operation, unfortunately, their 10-year-old daughter lost her ability to speak. She wasn't able to talk anymore. And so he is very distraught, of course. And by this time it's already Passover, and he's staying in Flatbush with his daughter, and he decided he's going to visit the Rebbe for the Mashiach Seudah, the meal of Mashiach. He comes to the Rebbe, he walks over from Flatbush to Crown Heights, and in the middle of the farbrengen from the Mashiach Seudah, the Rebbe calls him over between his talks, and the Rebbe says to him the following: Matzah is called the food of faith, and matzah is called the food of healing. Here is a piece of matzah for your daughter, that she should be healed, and here is a piece of matzah for you, so you should have faith. The Rebbe said, your daughter does need to suffer because of your lack of faith. Your daughter doesn't need to suffer, she should be healed. Okay, that's what the Rebbe said. After the farbrengen is over, the Rebbe customarily gives out wine to each person, wine of the cup that he used to say the after blessing for the meal, which is called in halacha the wine of blessing, bracha. When he came by the Rebbe said to him the following: the month of Nisan, it comes before the month of Iyar. The order is Nisan comes before Iyar. Nisan is a month of faith. It's a month that Hashem took us out of Egypt, so it's called the month of faith. And Iyar is called the month of healing. Elsewhere it says that Iyar is an acronym for the words I am Hashem who heals you. So Iyar is a month of healing, and Nisan is a month of faith. Oh, I forgot to mention this very important point, which I started saying. When he was in the Rebbe's room originally, the Rebbe told the month of Adar is a month of joy because everything is transformed. The Rebbe took his hands and he moved his holy hands from right to left. He moved his holy hands from right to left, and he says it's transformed. Everything is transformed. That's what the Rebbe said. Anyways, so now Cashapp bracha, the Rebbe said the usual order is that Nisan comes before Iyar. First there is a month of faith, and then there is a month of healing. But here the opposite will happen. V'napachu. Sometimes it could be the opposite. That first there will be the healing, and then there will be the faith. First your daughter will be healed, and this will bring to faith. That very night, his daughter was completely healed. Baruch Hashem was able to speak again. V'napachu. And it was transformed. And instead of him having to have faith until his daughter was healed, the opposite, her healing brought him to, of course, to have a greater faith in Hashem. And as we are beginning this week of Vayakel, where we're reading about the Jewish people gathering together to build the Mishkan, Hashem bless us all to be gathered from all corners of the world to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim, to the Holy Mountain, to the Bais Hamikdash, the third Bais Hamikdash. And we should begin this week with a sense of joy and happiness. This is the month of Adar. And as great as the joy of Purim is, now Torah says to increase in joy every day of Adar. So whatever is going on that's not the way it's meant to be, it's not the way that's not openly good, by adding in joy, adding in simcha, adding in trusting in Hashem, we cause a transformation of it until we'll merit to see the transformation of all negative to positive, the coming Mashiach. We see this happen tonight, Mamish, go to Yerushalayim tonight with Mashiach. A good tavach.